After 12 years, Silent Hill finally has a new game, and it surprisingly turned out to be pretty good. The Silent Hill 2 remake was my most anticipated game of this year, so I was impressed that it was able to live up to the hype. With this being the first game review on my channel, I want to discuss my thoughts on it as someone who was an outsider to the series until now. To give a bit of context on my history with the franchise, it was always a series I wanted to get into, but never got the chance. It wasn't until much later when I started watching those reviews and video essays of the Silent Hill games, especially for 2. So I was already pretty familiar with the story of Silent Hill 2 before the remake was even announced, and I can understand why the story left an impact on a lot of people and why it's considered one of the best games of all time. It sort of built up an expectation for me as well, since I was curious if Bloober Team could actually manage to pull off the remake for the hardcore fans of the original. From what I've seen so far, a lot of longtime fans are praising the remake, and as someone who's never played a Silent Hill game before, I honestly agree with them. Bloober Team adapted the story pretty much one for one with the original. I'm sure by now you all know the premise of Silent Hill 2. James Sunderland receives a letter from his wife Mary, who he claims to have died 3 years prior. He's told that she'll be waiting for him in their special place, that being in Silent Hill. The opening of the game is pretty linear. You meet Angela in the cemetery, then make your way into town before getting a taste of the game's combat. A pattern I've noticed is that Silent Hill is more remembered for its story than its gameplay. So how well does the remake play? The combat reminds me a lot of the Callisto Protocol. I know how most people feel about that game, but hear me out. You can approach encounters with either melee or your guns. Melee is efficient if you master dodging and know when to attack, and firearms easily dispatch enemies, but you run the risk of not having enough ammo for boss fights. I focused on getting used to the melee combat so that I can save ammo for intense areas and bosses. Ammo and health are pretty generous, and from what I can tell, the difficulty doesn't seem to affect how many drops there are. You only get 2 melee weapons like in the original, the 4x4 and the lead pipe, and the chainsaw when you start New Game Plus. As for firearms, you get 3, the pistol, the shotgun, and the hunting rifle. I wouldn't say the guns feel powerful, but landing shots feels satisfying. You can dodge in 4 directions, and the invincibility frames are pretty forgiving, meaning it doesn't matter which direction you dodge when enemies attack you. At times the combat felt floaty, if that makes any sense. In Callisto Protocol, for example, the combat locks you onto the enemy closest to you. Even when you're dodging, you're still locked in place. In Silent Hill 2, there is no lock-on, and the dodge timing actually matters. Depending on where an enemy is standing, the terrain can also mess you up as well. I still enjoyed the combat in the remake, but it does feel a little rough around the edges at certain points. What this and Callisto Protocol's combat have in common is that they don't handle group combat well. Enemies will gang up on you if they get the chance, and they don't care if you're in the middle of a combo. At least in Callisto, it was eventually fixed so that enemies would take turns before attacking you. So in Silent Hill 2, you have to think about how to approach an encounter if there's more than one enemy in front of you. The same time we gain access to melee combat, we also get the radio. Any longtime fan knows that the radio lets you know when enemies are nearby. However, the radio doesn't work with every enemy, since it won't activate when enemies are hiding, which happens once the mannequins are introduced. Whenever I heard the radio going off, it made me much more cautious every time I entered a room. You can also turn the radio off for an extra level of challenge. We get our first major puzzle at the Woodside Apartments. This is also the area where we first meet Eddie, another recurring character who was led to Silent Hill. I knew this series had puzzles in them, but I was surprised at how many there were when I played the remake. Pretty much every area you visit has a puzzle you need to solve in order to progress. Some puzzles had me stumped for a bit, and some were easier to figure out. There are hints to help you solve them, but how helpful they are depends on what puzzle difficulty you're playing on. The first puzzle involves finding 3 coins to place them correctly in a machine. It takes a bit of exploration and dropping cases of juiced out garbage chutes, but once you put all 3 in the right pattern, it gives James a key to apartment 201. Inside the apartment, we have our first scene of Pyramid Head. Yeah, you know the one. James hides in the closet and shoots Pyramid Head a few times in the helmet, which reminds him that he left the stove on, so he just leaves. They really nailed the weirdness factor the original had with cutscenes like this. It's good to see Pyramid Head in a game again. And no, Dead by Daylight doesn't count for me. This wraps up the Woodside Apartments, so we move on to the next area. In the Blue Creek Apartments, some enemies have new attacks. They puke acid once they're down, and they get a new projectile. To progress through the area, James has to find the hands for a grandfather clock and set it to the right time. The game teaches you that with every main puzzle, there are smaller ones you have to solve as well. I thought it was pretty interesting how some of them were connected. Eventually, we start to hear this in the background. Pyramid Head starts to damage the environment, which I thought was an awesome detail. At the end of this section is when we have our first fight with him. I didn't learn until afterwards that you don't even have to use any ammo. You can just dodge him long enough until he leaves. Damaging Pyramid Head shortens the amount of time you have to survive for. So you can either use ammo to end the fight quickly or take the chance and only dodge him. His attacks are pretty telegraphed and easy to deal with, except for this side slice. He also has a grab that will catch you if you're spamming the dodge button. You can't just cheese him by circling around the same piece of cover either. He'll destroy them over the course of the fight. While that's happening, the walls around you start to close in. This makes it easier for Pyramid Head to close the distance with you. After surviving long enough, Pyramid Head disappears yet again. James runs into Laura, who befriended Mary while she was in the hospital. Right after this is when we first meet Maria. And I feel like I should mention how well the actors did in handling these iconic moments. Luke Roberts really captured the sadness of James's character. Maria's actress was hit and miss at times, but I'd say she did pretty good at portraying the duality between Mary and Maria. I really enjoyed how they handled their dynamic. When Maria joins you, you're supposed to cut through a hotel to progress, but there's actually a bit to explore in this area. You can reach this diner and get the jack lever, which you can use on the garage to get some health and ammo you might have missed. There's also the gas station and bowling alley if you go down the street. You can even reach the Historical Society even though you can't enter until later. You get plenty of dialogue between James and Maria if you decide to explore, so that's a nice touch. Once you get to the hotel, you can explore the rooms for some items and a callback to Maria's original outfit.
Hey, you think I'd look good in this one?
Sure.
Not quite the ringing endorsement, but hey, I'll take it.
The next main area is the Brookhaven Hospital, and I actually really like this section. Something that always intimidated me about the original game was the level design. But this is where the map really starts to come in handy. The hospital has several floors you have to navigate, and we get introduced to the nurse enemy type. They'll swing at you more than once, and they can even grab your weapon in the middle of a combo. As if that wasn't bad enough, they're all over the place. Thankfully, this is also where we find the shoddy, which is pretty helpful in taking care of nurses. Solving the bracelet puzzle gives you the key to the rooftop. And oddly enough, there's only a note up here. I thought there would be a lot more than— oh shit! Not gonna lie, that actually got me the first time. James lands in a different part of the hospital and finds Laura. She traps him in a room where we have our next boss, the Flesh Lip. And yes, that's actually the name of it. Bosses in the remake have multiple phases. The first phase has it climbing in the ceiling where it occasionally drops down to attack. I wasn't sure how to make it come down, so the first phase took me a bit longer than it was supposed to. It grows extra limbs once you do enough damage, and it has new attacks. The Flesh Lip will attack you on the ground during its second phase. It has one main combo string, a charge, and a spinning attack. Something I've noticed about the bosses is they're pretty easy to dodge, even on higher difficulties, but I still thought the fights were really fun. In a weird way, they sort of reminded me of Dark Souls bosses, but nowhere near as difficult. After beating the boss, another Flesh Lip pulls James into the next area. The Otherworld is an alternate version of the hospital, but James now has to open a safe with 3 locks on it. Each chain has a path you have to solve in order to unlock them. This is also when the knife-wielding nurses show up, and I got hit by them more times than I want to admit. After unlocking the box, James gets an elevator button and a new door is revealed. It requires 2 rings that you have to find. The order in which you put them helps determine which ending you get. Taking the elevator gives you a monologue that was definitely inspired by PT.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat, where you answer our questions correctly and win a prize beyond your wildest dreams.
Apparently the answers are for a combination to a safe you can find, but I didn't hear about this until after my playthrough. We find the first ring that Maria finally catches up. Oh yeah, I forgot about her.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours.
Ouch. You get the lead ring shortly after, which leads you to the basement. Then there's the chase scene with Pyramid Head. It's a short sequence, but I thought it was awesome seeing Pyramid Head bust through walls trying to get you. After losing Maria, we're able to leave the hospital. The way to the next area is fairly long and has a lot of enemies. This brings us to the second half of the game, starting with the Historical Society. In my opinion, the next 2 areas are probably my least favorite. After going down the staircase from Super Mario 64, we reach the Toluca prison. And I'm really not a fan of the puzzle for this area. Basically, you have to use a scale to open doors and find all the weights for the scale. Each door has an expanded area and plenty of these crawling mannequins. I hope you like getting hit by these out of nowhere because it's gonna happen a lot. And there's 4 doors to go through. How fun. In the prison, we also get the hunting rifle, but the game doesn't really give much ammo for it. Finishing the scale puzzle brings out the noose puzzle, which is nice because this area made me really want to use one. Now you have to match these inscriptions correctly so you can determine which noose to pull. Pull the wrong one and it sends you to an area filled with enemies, but thankfully you can run by them pretty easily. Pulling the correct one brings James to the next boss fight.
Daddy!
This fight alone made the entire prison section worth going through. The Abstract Daddy is personally my favorite boss of the game. It easily has the best upgrade from the original. While the fight itself wasn't difficult, the presentation was incredible. The Abstract Daddy actually looks powerful, as it destroys the environment around you in the first encounter. The first phase feels like you're trying to escape it more than actually fight it. The environment itself helps in making you feel trapped. I also can't be the only one who thought this area looked like the backrooms, right? It shows up 3 times where you have to defend yourself. While it's still pretty easy to dodge, it felt satisfying unloading ammo into this thing. The second phase is in a wider area, but the Abstract Daddy gets a faster charge attack. It doesn't have a lot of attacks since it mainly tries to grab you. Between the two, the Flesh Slip has more varied attacks, but the Abstract Daddy has the best presentation. Once the fight is over, we meet with Maria again. Wait, what?
You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything. But you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
This leads into the labyrinth section. Here you have to use this rotating cube to bring out the right platform 3 different times. I wasn't really a fan of this section either, but it's not terrible. The first 2 platforms are more puzzle oriented, and it's also where the Mandarin enemy type shows up. But thankfully, the last platform is just 3 combat sections you have to fight through. At the end of this section, James finds Maria dead again, which reminds him of Mary. Back upstairs is Pyramid Head's weapon, the Great Knife. James pulls it out and it allows him to move through the gateway of hell, or whatever this is supposed to be. I interpret this as James starting to push through his guilt, especially with the imagery of him dragging the blade, since he and Pyramid Head are technically the same person. But that's just my guess. James runs into Eddie again, who's more unhinged than before.
You've been laughing at me all along. Ever since we first met. But you ain't laughing now, are you?
Not gonna lie, James punching Eddie was pretty hype. This is another fun boss fight. Part of what makes it stand out is that you're actually fighting a human this time. Eddie has 3 phases and each one makes the fight more challenging. Eddie will try to shoot you once he sees you, but you can dodge the gunshot if you time it correctly. You can also use the hanging meat for cover, which blocks his gunshot. This is helpful since he'll try to shoot you if you're trying to heal. Even though he usually keeps his distance, Eddie will punch you if he's close enough. Eddie's second phase makes it harder to spot him, so he's gonna get some shots in unless you spot him first. After dealing enough damage, the hanging meat starts to move. This makes it more tricky to use the meat as cover while still obscuring Eddie. Yet another fight that was vastly improved from the original. We are now in the home stretch as James makes his way to the final area. He meets Laura at the Lakeview Motel, who gives him Mary's letter to her, but she realizes she doesn't have the letter meant for James. Now you need the key for Corridor 3F, which is in the music box. To open the music box, you have to find 3 figurines to place inside. With this being the final area, there are smaller puzzles to solve in order to acquire them. The first figurine is in the fireplace, which triggers another boss fight. It's another Mandarin, except he's hanging from the ceiling instead of the floor. He's like the other Mandarins, but it has more health and new animations. While it's not a bad boss, there's not really a lot for me to comment on. It's a solid encounter though. You get the next figurine in room 201 after piecing a mirror back together. Getting the last one is the most annoying because you have to do it without any of your equipment. Because it wouldn't be a modern horror game if there wasn't a section that took away all your weapons. Alien Isolation had it, Resident Evil 8 had it, and so does this game. It's not difficult by any means, but it was definitely intense on my first playthrough. Now that you have all 3 figurines, you can head back to the music box for the Corridor 3F key. This leads James to room 312 where he and Mary stayed.
It's too bad we have to leave. Promise you'll take me again, James.
James killed Mary. Realizing this, he makes his way deeper into the hotel and finds Maria one last time. Pyramid Head is a manifestation of James's guilt and trauma, just like how Maria is the version of Mary he really wanted. And seeing Pyramid Head kill Maria is a reminder to James of what he did to Mary. For the first time since she died, James starts to accept what he did and why he blocked it out for so long.
I'm ready.
You now have to fight two Pyramid Heads at once. They both have spears, so their attack patterns are different than before. They hit much faster and they'll combo you to death if you're unlucky. They occasionally swing more than once and even throw their spear at you. The best thing you can do is keep your distance and take shots when you can. I also found it better to dodge to the side than backwards, since some attacks will still catch you. I don't know if they share the same health bar or if they each have their own, but after you've damaged them enough times, this happens. They give you the Scarlet Egg and the Rust-Colored Egg to place in the two doors behind them. Depending on which door you go through, it helps determine which ending you get. Once you do that, you'll start to hear Mary's speech in the hallway.
Why are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James. Wait. Please. Don't go. Don't leave me alone.
Based on how you play, James will either face Mary or Maria at the end. One who doesn't forgive him for what he's done, or one who doesn't want to let him go. This is another multi-phase boss as well. Mary sends out these tracking projectiles while teleporting around the arena. They can be destroyed with the shotgun or the rifle. As long as you keep doing damage, she'll continue teleporting. Mary will grow some extra limbs and you'll be brought to a darker area in the second phase. Here she'll stay above you while occasionally dropping down for you to land some shots. Mary still tries to attack you when she drops down, so be mindful of that. Once you've done enough damage, you'll enter the third phase. Luckily, there's an autosave for each phase, so even if you fail, you won't have to do the whole fight all over again. Mary has new attacks in her new form, including a 3-hit combo, a charge, and a yell that stuns you. Even her single-hit attacks have range, so they can catch you if you're trying to heal. While this is happening, she still sends out her projectiles throughout the whole fight. James is eventually able to win against Mary, finally putting an end to his nightmare.
James.
Depending on your choices, James will handle the outcome differently. Like most people, I got the leave ending on my first playthrough. James will leave Silent Hill and adopt Laura as his daughter, which is what Mary wanted. The Maria and In Water endings have James either staying with Maria or taking his own life after everything he's been through. Then there's the brand new Rebirth ending where James plans to bring Mary back to life. Of course, there's the joke endings as well, so at least Bloober Team kept those in. Overall, I had a great time playing this game. Sure, there may have been some technical issues here and there, but it was nothing that got in the way of my experience. Bloober Team captured the atmosphere of Silent Hill 2 and kept the story intact. They improved the gameplay and the bosses while making it accessible to a newer audience. And I'm glad this was my introduction to the franchise. I hope there will be more remakes in the future and that the new games in development are just as good, if not better, than the remake of Silent Hill 2. You can be certain that I'll be checking those games out in the future. I know I'm late to the party in reviewing this game, but I'm not exactly in a position to make videos full time, though I hope to be able to someday. I appreciate everyone who's been patient enough for me to finish this video. Since this was my first game review, let me know your thoughts so I know how to approach other games in the future. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's given my channel a chance these past few months. I've always wanted to make content for YouTube, and the fact there are people who watch my videos means a lot to me. I'm looking forward to making more videos in 2025, and I can't wait to see you all here. Thank you again, and Happy New Year's.